the big picture here is just generally across the streaming market, Disney has these problems. They're going to start doing some Netflix moves, right? They're going to actively explore cracking down on password sharing, which seems to have worked really well for Netflix. They keep gesturing at the idea of selling themselves to Apple.
Okay. I want to this is what I want to call, I'm going to drop a curse word here. This is utter bullshit. This happens like every time. Apple is one of those companies that has a ton of money and they always have a ton of cash around, right? And so everybody's like, oh, what should they do with it? And like 6-7 years ago, it was like, they should buy Netflix.
Yeah.
And they were never going to buy Netflix because that doesn't make sense.
First of all, they absolutely should have bought Netflix.
Yeah, it would have been great then, but they were never going to because it didn't make sense. And the idea that they were going to go and like Tim Cook, whose entire thing is like making money by being really smart about logistics, is going to take on the cruise and the theme park industry. Tim Cook's about to retire. Like he doesn't.
Yeah, that's why you buy Disney at the end. And you're like, look, Bob Iger, you hate retiring. Have you thought about being the CEO? Here you go. I bought Disney. I'm Tim Cook.
Yeah, now you go and do
my
all
swan
the
song is headsets and cruises together at last. And then he just rides off in
That's
the
a very
sunset
like retiree swan song.
on a horse made of money. This is the future of cruises.
Yeah.
Is you get on and you put on your Apple Vision Pro on your Disney cruise and you sit in a recliner.
But you're not actually on a boat at all. You're just at home.
You have a little
you're in a soundstage that
assistant.
rocks. Right. This is, by the way, the plot of WALL-E, so a little worried. But at least at the end, they save Earth.
I don't know. So the Disney Apple thing has always seemed suspicious to me, like to the point where I have always agreed with you, Alex, that this is like a thing people say because it sort of seems like it makes sense, but never was actually real. But the two things that happened this week that I thought were very interesting were Kim Masters at The Hollywood Reporter, who is very much like a person who knows everything about what's happening in Hollywood.
Yes.
Wrote a one of those stories that is like half reported and half speculative, but it's only speculative because you can't say out loud the things that other people have said to you that you know for sure, right? Like reading between the lines, this thing is like very accurate and very well sourced about basically, hypothetically, if you were Disney, here is what you would do if you wanted to sell your company to Apple. You would divest, you would pull the different pieces apart, and you would essentially turn yourself into a company full of characters and IP without a lot of stuff attached to it. And then you would sell that to Apple. And then you look around and, oh, that's exactly what Bob Iger kind of sounds like he wants to do with Disney. And so that happened. The piece is very good. We have it linked on the Verge. We should put it in the show notes too. Like Kim is a person who knows things, and I trust. I don't think Kim is like making this up out of whole cloth. And then the other thing was somebody on Disney's earnings call asked Bob Iger directly something to the effect of, "Are you selling to Apple?" And his answer was, he said, basically, I'm not going to say anything. It's not something that we obsess about. And then he said, obviously, anyone who wanted to speculate about these things would have to immediately consider the global regulatory environment. And then he said, I'll say no more than that. How do you not read that as, gosh, I'd really like to, but Lena Khan and the FTC super would not allow it to happen. Like, I don't know how else to read that statement from Bob Iger.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to the fact that this isn't going to happen. I mean, theoretically, it could, right? Like I don't want to say it's never going to happen, but it's very unlikely to, because the EU would come down on that new combined company and just destroy it. Like they would never allow it to happen, and it would be just borderline unconscionable for the FTC to let two of the biggest companies, the company that has like a practical monopoly in the theater space, practical monopoly in all these other spaces, and the biggest like company that has the app store monopoly combine into one mega company. Like that's bad business unless you're Bob Iger.
All right, I'm gonna make the argument.
Do it.
Be Bob. I'm
coming back to Disney as CEO.
Wow, congratulations.
The first thing Bob Iger says in every room. Look, I was leaving, but I'm coming back. Now here's the argument. I have two arguments to make. Okay. One is like a straightforward argument. We kind of went through this with Microsoft and Activision, and eventually the EU caved and the FTC lost, and like whatever, right? Like it is the same shape of thing, right? The big distribution platform buys a bunch of content. We seem to not know how to stop it. It just happens. Fine. Maybe it will just happen. I don't know if it will, but obviously Bob Iger is thinking about the global regulatory environment. Then there's, I think, what I would frame as the chaos argument, which is let them dance. You know, like this is how companies fall apart. Is like they get too big, and then this thing seems unmanageable, and like Apple's corporate culture will crush Disney.
Yeah.
And then maybe we'll be free. You know, it's like that's like it's the worst argument I can make. It is, I would say, the argument that, for example, has proven to be correct in the case of every AT&T acquisition in history. But go ahead, buy Time Warner.
Yeah, I was going to say AOL Time Warner is exactly this kind of merger that you're describing also.
Yeah, and it's like, yeah, go ahead, try. Like, see if that works out for you. See if you are not destroyed by your own hubris. I'm not saying that's a great policy outcome. Many people lose their jobs along the way, and lots of art doesn't get made. Although with Time Warner and AT&T, we did get the grayscale 4x3 Justice League, so that happened.
We're gonna get like a Marvel movie just shot all vertically, so it fits perfectly on your iPhone and profile. That's what you're getting.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm not saying they should or shouldn't do it. I just think that, like, if I'm Tim Cook, I'm looking at the history of these kinds of integrations, and I'm saying, oh, actually, in the end, this never works out.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't matter about the regulators. Like, if you are a smart business person, you look at integrations of this size, and you're like, oh, this is death. Like, this is what kills both companies in like meaningful ways at the end of the road.
And he's told people no in the past, right? Like, wasn't there the one where Elon was like, please buy Tesla before Tesla was Tesla?
Yeah.
And he was like, LOL, get out of my office. How did you get in here?
Actually, speaking of things they should have bought, right? Like the many attempts that Apple has made to make a car.
Yeah.
It should have just bought Tesla.
Yeah.
They would have solved the panel gaps. I'll tell you that much. They wouldn't have cheaped out on the materials.
Your whole hand goes in those panel gaps.
Yeah, but this is the thing that comes up every time the like possibility of Apple acquiring some sexy company comes up. Like, do you remember a couple of years ago when Peloton was flagging and everybody was like, oh, Apple's going to buy Peloton? And then there were a couple of people, I think, including our friend Steve Kovacs at CNBC, who just basically raised their hand and were like, why on earth would Apple want Peloton? Like, why all these companies need Apple makes a lot of sense. Why Apple, the richest company on the planet that has done a very good job of developing the ability to do almost anything very well over time, why on earth would it need like a warehouse full of treadmills and bikes that no one is buying?
Yeah.
And in this case, like, what does Apple need with a theme park?
To sell iPhones.
They run a very nice theme park in Cupertino. It's a circle. You can go to
That's
it.
true.
Yeah, it's I guess like the basic business advice is like, don't buy problems, you know? Like,
Yeah.
This is a huge problem. Like, the future of streaming is a huge problem. Apple's involved in these strikes, right? They are part of the AMPTP. They're up against SAG. They're up against the Writers Guild. Disclosure, Alex is part of the Writers Guild. Our newsroom is unionized with the Writers Guild. I'm a Netflix producer. Comcast owns a chunk of the company. You should watch our Netflix show. It's great.
That was your best one yet. That was like all in one breath. That was really good.
Someone wrote to us and said, your disclosures are starting to sound like flexes, so I'm trying to... But it is true that I'm a Netflix producer. You should watch our Netflix show. It's great. It was nominated for an Emmy. That's all just really complicated for Apple. And this is like their first baby step in the water, right? They're not like a huge distributor of TV shows. Buying Disney is like, now they're in it.
Yeah.
Like, they're fully in. Like, let's take an example. Jason Kilar took over at Time Warner, right? He took over Warner Media, and he was like, here's the thing we want to do. All the movies are going to go to streaming day and date. That is a thing that Apple would want to do to promote Apple TV Plus on their devices. And that thing broke Warner Media, pushed Kilar out of the CEO role, and we ended it with Discovery Max Plus, whatever it's called. Warner Brothers Discovery. Those are not easy. Those are culture decisions you have to make. They're not business decisions. And I think Apple likes being at a remove.